My brother erased my name from his 500-guest wedding like I was a stain on the seating chart. Then he called me a broke soldier, said I would embarrass him in front of successful people, and threw ice water in our father's face when Dad tried to defend me. I almost walked away, but inside my jacket was an envelope Landry had not opened yet, and inside that envelope was the truth about the man he thought he could humiliate, the gift he had just lost, and the life he never bothered to understand. I used to think being patient made me strong. That night I learned patience can become a hiding place for people who benefit from your silence. My brother did not just remove my name. He counted on me staying quiet after he did it. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Then stay with me, because when my brother opened that envelope, the room he wanted so badly to impress went completely silent. By the time I stepped into the lobby, the wedding was already making its statement. Crystal lights hung over polished marble. Men in tailored tuxedos shook hands like they were closing deals. Women in silk gowns moved past me with champagne-colored smiles. Somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, a string quartet was tuning up, soft and careful, the way rich people like their problems to sound. I wore a navy suit I had owned for years, polished black shoes, and a small service pin on my lapel. Nothing flashy, nothing meant to impress anyone. That had never been my way. My name is Callahan Voss. I'm 39 years old, the son in my family, and for most of my life, that meant I was the one expected to understand. I understood when plans changed. I understood when my brother Landry needed attention. I understood when my parents said, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I had spent years in the Army learning how to stay calm under pressure. These days, I worked in defense modernization, sitting in rooms where people discuss projects with more zeros than most folks see in a lifetime. But standing in that hotel lobby, waiting to attend my own brother's wedding, I felt like the kid nobody remembered to save a seat for. In my inside pocket was a cream envelope. I touched it once, lightly, just to make sure it was still there. That envelope was the reason I had come. Not to show anyone up, not to prove I belonged around Landry's wealthy friends. I came because, despite everything, he was still my brother. And maybe some quiet part of me still believed a generous act could close a gap that words never had. Before I joined the check-in line, my fingers brushed against something smaller in my pocket. An old challenge coin. My father, Merritt, had pressed it into my hand earlier that afternoon. He had looked tired when he did it, older than I wanted him to be. "People will tell you what you're worth," he said.
Don't let them decide. I had nodded, but I had not trusted myself to answer.
Now, in that lobby, I held on to his words for a second longer, then stepped forward. A young receptionist smiled at me from behind the table. "Name, please?" "Callahan Voss," I said. "I'm the groom's brother." Her smile stayed in place at first. Then she looked down at the iPad. One swipe, then another, then a third. The smile thinned. "Could you spell that for me?" I did. Behind me, guests began to gather. I heard a woman whisper, "Is there a problem?" A man gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they want you to know you are holding them up. The receptionist checked again. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm not seeing you on the guest list." I kept my voice even. "That's all right. Take your time." Maribel Knox, the wedding coordinator, stepped over with the practiced calm of someone who had handled late flowers, missing rings, and drunk uncles. She took the iPad, typed quickly, then paused. For half a second, the screen tilted toward me. I saw my name. Then I saw the note beside it. Removed by groom's request. 9:12 a.m. Nothing in the lobby changed. The lights still glittered. The quartet still warmed up. Guests still passed me on their way to celebrate my brother. But inside me, something went very still. This was not an oversight. This was not a clerical mistake. Landry had woken up on his wedding day and decided his younger brother did not belong in the room. Maribel turned the screen back toward herself, but it was too late. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I believed her. She looked more embarrassed than I did. I gave her a small nod. You didn't do it. Then I stepped out of line. I did not raise my voice. I did not demand a manager. I did not give the guests behind me the show they were already leaning in to watch. But the envelope in my pocket felt different now, heavier. I moved near one of the marble columns and looked toward the ballroom doors. 500 people were about to stand for my brother. Investors, CEOs, retired officers, people Landry had spent years trying to impress. And I was supposed to disappear quietly. For one foolish moment, I tried to protect him in my mind. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe someone else had pushed for it. Maybe this could still be handled privately. That was the habit my family had trained into me. Make it smaller, Callahan. Don't ruin the day, Callahan. Be the bigger man, Callahan. I took out my phone and called my brother. The call connected on the third ring. Music and laughter rushed through the speaker. Then Landry answered, his voice light, amused, and colder than I had ever heard it. You actually came? For a second, I thought Landry was making some strange joke. A bad one, maybe. The kind he used to make at family dinners when he wanted everyone to laugh before they realized someone had been cut. I stepped farther from the check-in table so the guests behind me could move on. There's an issue with the list, I said. They can't find my name. Landry did not sound surprised. I heard music behind him, low laughter, the clean clink of glassware. He was somewhere close, probably in one of those private rooms where the groom gets praised before the ceremony. Then came the pause. Not confusion, calculation. I know, he said. 2 words, quiet, casual, like he was telling me he had changed a lunch reservation. You know? I had them remove you. I looked toward the ballroom doors. People were still walking in, smiling, touching shoulders, saying things like, you look wonderful, and can you believe this place? The whole room was dressed up to celebrate a man who had just admitted he erased his brother before the vows were even spoken. Why would you do that? I asked. He let out a small breath. Callahan, don't do this tonight. Do what? Make me explain something you already understand. I kept my voice low. Say it anyway. Another pause, then his tone changed. It became polished, almost rehearsed. This wedding matters. It isn't just family sitting around eating cake. There are CEOs here, investors, people who can move my company into the next stage. Sable's father brought people I've been trying to meet for 2 years. That explains the guest list, I said. It doesn't explain removing your brother. You'd embarrass me. The words did not arrive loudly. That made them worse. He continued before I could answer. A broke soldier doesn't belong in a room like this. You don't belong among successful people, Callahan. You still think military service impresses everyone. It doesn't. The lobby around me seemed to narrow. I had sat in rooms where one signature could shift billions in defense modernization. I had watched contractors twice Landry's size choose every word carefully across a conference table from me. But my brother still pictured me as a man in worn boots with nothing to offer but old stories. You followed orders for a living, he said. Don't pretend you understand rooms where people make decisions. That one found bone. I did not answer right away. I thought of Christmas dinners where my deployments were met with polite nods before Landry changed the subject to funding rounds. I thought of my mother asking if I was still doing government work, as if I filed papers in a basement. I thought of my father watching me quietly, proud but silent, while the room bent itself around Landry. My family had always admired what could be displayed: cars, houses, titles, wedding guests with recognizable last names. Service was harder for them. Duty did not photograph well. A voice came from my left. Callahan? I turned. My father stood near the lobby seating area in his dark suit, one hand on the back of a chair. Merritt Voss had always been a steady man, but that night his face was tight with worry. What happened? He asked. I lowered the phone slightly. It's nothing, Dad. Landry heard him anyway. "Is Dad there?" he asked. My father stepped closer. "Landry, why is your brother standing out here?" I wanted to stop him. Not because he was wrong, but because I knew my brother. Landry hated being challenged in public. Dad took the phone from my hand before I could decide. "You removed your own brother from your wedding?" he said. "That's shameful, son." Through the speaker, Landry's voice sharpened. "Dad, stay out of it." "No, not this time." Those 4 words struck me harder than Landry's insults. My father, who had spent years smoothing things over, had finally drawn a line. A side door opened near the lounge, and Landry stepped out in his tuxedo, face flushed, jaw tight. He must have been closer than I realized. 2 groomsmen followed him halfway, then stopped when they saw my father. "Give me the phone," Landry said. Dad kept it at his side. "You owe your brother an apology." Landry looked past him at me. "This is exactly what I was trying to avoid," he said. "You showing up and turning my wedding into some poor me routine." I moved forward. "Don't talk to him like that." But Landry had already reached for a glass of ice water from a passing tray. It happened so fast the server froze. Landry threw the water straight into our father's face. The sound was small, just a splash against skin and fabric. Then silence spread through the lobby. Water ran Dad's glasses, over his cheeks, and onto his white shirt. He did not shout. He did not raise a hand. He simply stood there, blinking through the water, as if his own son had become someone he did not recognize. Landry pointed at him and said, "Stop taking the loser's side." I took 1 step toward my brother. Then I stopped. Not because he deserved restraint, because my father deserved dignity. I pulled a clean handkerchief from my pocket and gently took Dad's glasses from his face. My hand was steady. His was not. Behind me, someone whispered, "Oh my God." I wiped the lenses, then pressed the cloth into my father's hand. The challenge coin in my pocket felt heavier than anything I had carried that night. Watching my father stand there soaked and humiliated, I understood something I had been trying not to admit. This was not about a guest list anymore. It was about who my brother had become. I did not move toward Landry. That was the hardest choice I made that night. Every part of me wanted to step between him and the life he thought made him untouchable. But my father was standing beside me with water dripping from his chin onto his tie, and I knew the next 30 seconds would matter. If I gave Landry the scene he wanted, the story would become about my temper instead of his cruelty. So I turned away from my brother. "Come on, Dad," I said quietly. Merritt did not argue. He handed me his wet glasses, and I guided him toward a seating area tucked behind a row of tall plants near the lobby corridor. It was only 20 or 30 feet from the ballroom entrance, but it felt like another world. Guests kept passing. Some slowed down just enough to look. A few looked away too quickly, pretending they had seen nothing. That kind of pretending has a sound, a cough, a whisper, the shift of expensive shoes on marble. Dad sat down carefully, as if his knees no longer trusted him. I gave him the cleanest part of my handkerchief. He dabbed at his face, then his collar. His suit jacket was dark enough to hide most of the water, but his white shirt showed everything. Neither of us spoke. That silence hurt more than yelling would have. Because the humiliation had not happened at home. Not in a kitchen. Not during some private family argument where people could later say, things got heated. It happened in public, in front of strangers, staff, relatives, investors, and anyone else close enough to see a grown son throw water into his father's face. I knelt beside Dad to pick up the corner of the handkerchief that had slipped from his lap. When I leaned forward, the challenge coin fell from my pocket. It struck the marble with a small, clear ring. A hotel employee passing with a tray stopped, bent down, and picked it up. He looked at the coin, then at me. Something in his expression changed. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Sir," he said, handing it back. "Thank you," I replied. My father saw it in my palm. For a moment, the sadness on his face softened. He remembered giving it to me. He remembered the words, too. People will tell you what you're worth. Don't let them decide. I closed my hand around the coin. Behind us, the ballroom doors opened for another group of guests, and warm music spilled out into the hall. It sounded graceful, almost holy. Then the doors shut again, and we were left with the quiet. I looked at my father, and a memory came without asking. I was 12 years old, standing in the driveway, while Landry showed my relatives a trophy from a debate tournament. Everyone clapped. My mother took pictures. My grandmother said, "That boy is going places." I had a report card in my backpack with straight A's, but I never took it out. It seemed small compared to the show. Another memory followed. My first promotion in uniform. I called home from a base payphone because reception was terrible where I was. My mother said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then asked if I had heard Landry might be pitching to investors. I said yes. I always said yes. Then Christmas. Landry brought a slide deck to dinner, a real slide deck. He connected his laptop to my parents' television and talked about market share, valuation, growth strategy. Everybody watched like he was giving the State of the Union. When my father asked how my overseas assignment had gone, my mother said, "Let's not get into heavy things tonight." So we didn't. That became the family rule. Don't get into Callahan's life. It was too complicated, too distant, too difficult to brag about at church or over coffee with neighbors. Landry's success had numbers they understood. Mine came with silence. There was also the retirement ceremony. I had invited everyone. I told myself not to expect too much. Still, I saved seats. 2 cousins came. My father called afterward and said he was sorry, that your mother had not been feeling well, that Landry had an important meeting, that people were busy. People were always busy when the chair had my name on it. Each memory by itself was not enough to accuse anyone of cruelty. That was how these things survived in families. One skipped event, one changed subject, one small joke at your expense, one sentence like, "You know how your brother is." Individually, they sounded forgivable. Together, they formed a map. And sitting there beside my father, with wedding music swelling from behind closed doors, I finally saw where that map had been leading. I had spent most of my adult life believing patience was a virtue my family needed from me. I told myself I was being mature, loyal, steady. I told myself a good son did not keep score. But there is a difference between grace and disappearance. There is a difference between forgiving people and handing them permission to erase you. My father cleared his throat. His voice came out rough. "I should have stopped it sooner," he said. I looked at him. He stared at the coin in my hand, not at my face. Before I could answer, applause rose from inside the ballroom. It started soft, then grew. The ceremony had begun. Landry was walking toward the altar, surrounded by 500 people who saw the version of him he had polished for years. His brother was outside. His father was drying water from his shirt. Neither of us had a seat. Dad closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was something in his expression I had never seen from him before. Not just regret, something heavier. As the applause echoed through the walls, my father finally told me something he had kept buried for years, and it changed how I saw our family forever. My father did not speak right away. He looked toward the ballroom doors, where the applause had faded into the softer sounds of a wedding ceremony underway. Chairs shifting, a woman laughing quietly, the officiant's voice muffled by thick walls and money. Then he looked at me. "I saw it," he said. I waited. I did not push him. A man like my father did not open a locked door unless he had already spent years standing behind it. He rubbed the bridge of his nose where his glasses had been. His shirt was still damp, but he seemed less concerned about the water than about the memory behind it. "I saw how we treated you," he said. "Your mother and I, the whole family. I saw how every room turned toward Landry. I saw how often you were expected to step back. Those words landed harder than I expected, not because they surprised me, because they confirmed I had not imagined it. For years, I had wondered if I was being too sensitive, too quiet, too proud to ask for what I needed. Families have a way of making the overlooked person question his own eyes. Dad stared down at his hands. I kept telling myself peace mattered more, he said. I thought if I corrected your brother, it would start a fight. If I challenged your mother, it would ruin dinner. If I defended you too strongly, people would say I was choosing sides. His voice cracked, just slightly. But silence chose a side, didn't it? I had no answer for that. The hallway felt smaller around us. Not crowded, just heavy. Inside the ballroom, Landry was probably smiling at Sable, letting everyone see the polished man he wanted to be. Out here, his father was admitting what our family had spent decades dressing up as normal. I made you the easy son, Dad said, and that wasn't fair. That sentence opened something in me I had worked hard to keep closed. The easy son. That was exactly what I had been. The one who could drive himself to the airport. The one who could miss holidays without making anyone feel guilty. The one who would say, "It's fine," even when it was not. The one asked to understand because Landry was busy. Landry was stressed. Landry had pressure. Landry had a company. Landry had big things happening. And I did understand. Until understanding became a cage. I sat beside Dad and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Through the windows across the sitting area, the dark river caught the lights from the city. Washington looked calm from that distance. Like every powerful room in town, did not have a man inside it trying to prove he belonged. Dad's eyes dropped to the cream envelope resting against the inside of my jacket. "What did you bring him?" he asked. I almost said, "Just a card." That would have been easier. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled the envelope out. I held it in both hands for a moment, feeling the weight of paper, keys, and a decision I had made months before this night went wrong. "It's not just a wedding card," I said. Gad looked at me carefully. I took a breath. "I bought a place. In Georgetown. Waterfront penthouse." He blinked once. "You bought a penthouse?" I nodded. "How much?" 3.8 million. His mouth opened a little, but no words came out. The surprise on his face was not greed. It was not even pride exactly. It was the shock of realizing how much of my life I had kept out of reach because nobody had cared enough to ask. "How?" he asked softly. "Years of work. Equity from a consulting firm I helped build after I left uniform. Some investments. A lot of discipline." I gave a faint smile that did not last. "Turns out driving the same truck for 12 years saves more than people think." Dad stared at the envelope. "Was it for you?" "No." The word sat between us. Then I said what I had not told anyone. "It was for Landry and Sable." Dad's face changed. I looked down at the envelope because looking at him was too hard. "You remember that building he used to talk about? The one by the water? Every time we drove through Georgetown, he'd point at it like it was the finish line. He said people who lived there had made it. He said one day he'd bring clients there, investors, partners. He said it would prove he belonged." Dad closed his eyes. I remember. "I found out one of the units was going up quietly before it hit the market. I bought it through an LLC, had the transfer documents prepared. The key is in here." My voice stayed level, but my chest felt tight. I wasn't trying to make him feel small. I wasn't trying to show up with some grand gesture. I just thought maybe, after everything, I could give him something that said, "I still want you to win." Dad looked toward the ballroom. Behind those doors, my brother had called me a broke soldier. Behind those doors, 500 people were waiting to toast him. And inside my hand was the future he had once described as proof of success. "Does Landry know?" Dad asked. "No." "Your mother?" "No." "Sable?" "No one." Dad exhaled slowly. He was quiet for so long I could hear the faint scrape of a chair from inside the ceremony. Then he said, "After tonight, maybe some gifts were never meant to be opened." I looked at the envelope again. Part of me wanted to walk out with it, put Dad in my car, leave the hotel, and let Landry have the room he had wanted so badly. Let him have every handshake, every smile, every photograph. But another part of me knew silence had protected him long enough. The ceremony music shifted. People inside began to applaud again. Chairs moved. Doors opened at the far end of the hall as staff prepared for cocktail hour. I stood. Dad looked up at me. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said. But that was not true anymore. Not completely. 10 minutes later, I found Maribel Knox near the reception table. I handed her the cream envelope and made a choice that would change every life in my family. I did not hand Maribel the envelope right away. For a moment, I stood near the edge of the reception area and watched the wedding come back to life around me. The ballroom doors were open now. Guests spilled into the hall with full glasses, bright smiles, and the kind of laughter people save for expensive events. Landry and Sable were somewhere inside, surrounded by cameras and congratulations. Nobody looked for me. That should not have surprised me, but it still managed to hurt. The groom's brother had been removed from the list, left in the lobby, insulted over the phone, and his father had been humiliated in public. Yet the wedding moved on without so much as a ripple. The music played, the servers moved, the powerful shook hands. That was the thing about being invisible in a family. Eventually, everyone learns to step around the space where you should have been. Maribel saw me before I reached the table. Her face changed slightly, not with curiosity, but with caution. "Mr. Voss," she said. I held out the cream envelope. "I need you to give this to Landry." She looked down at it, then back at me. "Would you like me to put it with the gifts?" "No." My voice was calm. "Please place it directly in his hands during the reception. Not now, not in a side room, during the celebration." Her fingers closed around it slowly. She was professional enough not to ask what was inside. Still, she understood it mattered. "I'll make sure he gets it," she said. "Thank you." I turned before I could change my mind. Dad was waiting near the lobby entrance. His shirt had dried in patches, but the front still showed a faint stain where the water had spread. He looked toward the ballroom once, then at me. "I'm leaving with you," he said. "You don't have to." "Yes," he said, in the steady voice I remembered from childhood. "I do." So we walked out together. No announcement, no dramatic exit. Just two men moving through the hotel doors into the autumn air, while behind us, my brother's perfect evening kept shining. At the curb, Dad paused and looked back. The hotel glowed like it belonged to another country, one where money could polish anything clean. "I used to think places like that proved something," he said. I opened the passenger door for him. "Maybe they do." He looked at me. "They prove who changes when they get inside." A few blocks away, we found a small restaurant with red vinyl booths and coffee that smelled burnt in the comforting way diner coffee always does. It was not elegant. Nobody cared what suit I wore. Nobody asked whose table we belonged to. We ordered soup and sandwiches because neither of us had much appetite. For a while, we just sat there. I kept thinking about the speech I had written in my head, how I would have told Landry that brothers can disagree and still show up, how I would have handed him the key and watched his face change when he realized the penthouse he had dreamed about was his. The river view, the terrace, the place he once called proof that a man had arrived. I had almost given him everything, and I finally understood something ugly but useful. People reveal their hearts most clearly when they believe you have nothing left to offer. My phone vibrated. I ignored it. Then it vibrated again. Dad glanced toward the table. A third vibration came before the waitress returned with our food. Then another. Then two in a row. I turned the phone face down. Dad did not ask. He already knew. Somewhere back at that wedding, Landry had opened the envelope. Inside there was no cash, no emotional letter begging to be included, no wedding toast from the brother he had mocked. There was my executive identification, my credentials, a concise packet showing my role in national defense modernization programs, the kind of billion-dollar work many people in that ballroom had spent careers trying to get near. Not classified details, nothing improper, just enough truth to destroy a lie. The broke soldier had never been broke. The man who supposedly did not belong among successful people had been sitting in rooms my brother's investors wanted access to. The phone kept lighting up against the table. When I finally turned it over, the screen showed 43 missed calls, 9 voicemails, texts from relatives who rarely remembered my birthday, unknown numbers with DC area codes, and one message from Landry, "Call me, right now." I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone back down beside my untouched soup. I thought discovering the truth would embarrass my brother. I had no idea it was about to destroy the image he had spent his entire life building. Dad and I did not stay at the restaurant much longer. The soup had gone lukewarm, and neither one of us had managed more than a few bites. Outside the window, traffic moved past in thin lines of white and red. Inside, the waitress refilled coffee cups and pretended not to notice the phone lighting up beside my plate. I paid the check, helped Dad into my truck, and drove him home through quiet streets. He kept the napkin from the restaurant pressed against his damp shirt, not because it helped much, but because he needed something to do with his hands. When we reached his house, he sat there for a moment before opening the door. "You don't have to handle all of this alone," he said. I looked at the dashboard instead of at him. "I know, but we both knew I had handled most things alone for a long time." After he went inside, I drove back to my apartment. I did not answer a single call on the way. By the time I got home, took off my suit jacket, and placed the challenge coin on my kitchen counter, the story had already begun moving without me. I learned what happened in pieces. A voicemail from a cousin, a text from an old family friend, 2 messages from numbers I did not recognize. Later, one carefully worded note from Maribel Knox. Landry had opened the envelope during the reception, just after the first round of speeches. According to my cousin, he expected a card, maybe a check, maybe some sentimental apology from the brother he had just humiliated. Instead, he pulled out my credentials. He found my executive identification, my business card, and a clean, legal summary of my role in national defense modernization programs. Nothing classified, nothing dramatic, just facts. Names of public-facing initiatives, program offices, industry boards, advisory panels. At first, Landry laughed. That was what one guest told me. He held the papers like they were a prank and said, "Come on, this is Callahan. He's trying to make a point." Then someone at the table stopped smiling. A defense contractor from McLean recognized one of the program names. Another guest recognized the office seal on my credentials. A retired officer asked to see the card again. That was when the air changed. People who had ignored my absence began asking where I was. One investor, a man Landry had been trying to impress for months, reportedly asked, "Why wasn't your brother here tonight?" Landry did not have an answer that helped him. The answers he had used on me would have sounded ugly in that room. Because he's a broke soldier does not play well when half the guests are veterans, contractors, or people whose fortunes depend on defense partnerships. Another person said, quietly but close enough to be heard, "Do you know how long companies wait to get a meeting with someone like him?" That line reached me through 3 different messages. I did not feel pride when I read it. I felt tired. There is a strange pain in being recognized only after someone else finds proof. Like your word was never enough. Like your life did not count until it came with letterhead. By midnight, my phone had become a courtroom. My mother called first. Then she called again. Then she sent a message. "Callahan, please call me. Your brother says there has been a misunderstanding." That was our family's favorite word, misunderstanding. A soft word for a hard truth. An aunt texted, "Is this real?" A cousin wrote, "Why didn't anyone know?" Another relative sent, "Landry is saying you set him up. Please tell me that's not true." Nobody asked how Dad was. Not at first. That told me more than any apology could have. I stood in my kitchen with my tie loosened and listened to one voicemail from my mother. Her voice sounded thin, strained, almost offended by confusion. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. "Callahan, why would you keep something like this from your own family?" I played that line twice. "Why didn't you tell us?" I wanted to laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Tell you when, Mom? Between the dinners where my work was brushed aside? During the holidays when Landry's plans swallowed the whole room? After the phone calls where you asked if I was still doing that government thing?" They never wanted to know me. They wanted me to remain simple. Simple was easier. Simple let them believe Landry was the successful one, I was the dependable one, and Dad's silence was peace instead of surrender. The truth had not created chaos. It had exposed the chaos that had been sitting at the table with us for years. I walked to the counter and picked up the challenge coin. It was cool against my palm. Dad's words came back to me, quiet and worn but still standing. "Don't let them decide." For a while, I sat alone in the dark living room with the phone beside me. Every time it lit up, I looked at the name and let it fade. I thought I would feel vindicated, maybe even relieved. I did not. Being proven right is not the same as being healed. The people who should have known me had needed a public embarrassment to discover I had value. That kind of recognition does not warm you. It only shows you how cold the room had been. Near dawn, after the calls slowed and the city outside my window turned gray, one more message came in. It was from my cousin Aaron, one of the few people in the family who had never treated kindness like weakness. The text said, "You need to see this." Below it was a photograph from the reception. Landry stood beside the head table in his tuxedo. His face had gone pale. His practiced smile was gone. Guests around him were turned in his direction, some confused, some watching too closely. And in his hand was the cream envelope. For a moment, I thought the picture was only proof of his embarrassment. Then Aaron sent another message. This one carried something far more dangerous. It proved the wedding was only the beginning. I stared at Aaron's second message for a long time before opening the image. It was another photograph from the reception, taken from the side of the ballroom. At first, I only noticed Landry standing stiffly near the head table, still holding the envelope like it had burned him. Then I saw the screen behind him. Someone had pulled up a luxury real estate listing on a phone and mirrored it to one of the venue displays. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe someone was trying to confirm a rumor. Either way, there it was for half the room to see. The Georgetown waterfront penthouse, Landry's dream place, the same terrace, the same view, the same floor-to-ceiling windows he had once pointed at from the street like a man staring at his future. Under the photo, Aaron wrote, "Does he know about the apartment?" I set the phone down. No, Landry did not know. He knew about my work now. He knew the "broke soldier" line had made him look foolish in front of the very people he wanted to impress. But he still had no idea how close he had come to receiving the one thing he had talked about for half his adult life. 2 days passed before I answered him. That does not mean he stopped trying. He called from his own phone, then Sable's, then numbers I did not recognize. My mother left messages telling me family should not air things out in front of outsiders. An uncle texted, "You boys need to fix this before it gets worse." That was another family habit. When Landry caused damage, everyone looked for the nearest broom and handed it to me. On Monday morning, I went to my office in Northern Virginia, put my phone in a drawer, and tried to work. There were briefings to review, budget notes to correct, and a vendor meeting that required a steady face. I had learned a long time ago that personal pain does not cancel professional responsibility. Near noon, my desk phone rang. Only a few people had that line. I answered. Callahan Voss. For half a breath, there was no sound. Then Landry said, "It's me." His voice was different. Not sorry, not yet, but stripped of its usual confidence. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "Does that matter right now? It tells me how desperate you are." He tried to laugh. It came out thin. "Look, we need to talk like adults. We could have done that before you removed me from your wedding. I was under pressure. You threw water in Dad's face. That got out of hand. No, a tray tipped over gets out of hand. You made a choice." He went quiet. Then he said, "What was in that envelope?" "You opened it." "I mean all of it." I leaned back in my chair and looked through the glass wall of my office. People moved through the hallway carrying folders and coffee, living ordinary lives while my family finally discovered I had one too. "There was supposed to be more," I said. "What does that mean?" "The penthouse." His breathing changed. I did not soften it for him. "The Georgetown place you used to talk about. I bought it months ago. The documents were prepared as a wedding gift for you and Sable." Silence filled the line. Not the calculating pause from the hotel lobby. This was emptier. He had no polished answer ready. "You're lying," he said, but there was no strength behind it. "No. You bought my penthouse? It was never yours." That sentence landed where I intended. After all his talk about belonging among successful people, Landry had mistaken desire for ownership. He had believed wanting something loudly enough made it his. "I was going to give it to you," I said, "before you decided I didn't belong in the room." When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Callahan." For one dangerous moment, I heard my brother instead of my enemy. I remembered us as boys in the backyard, throwing a baseball until the porch light came on. I remembered road trips where we shared headphones in the back seat. I remembered a version of Landry who had not yet learned to turn every room into a scoreboard. A part of me wanted that version to still exist. After the call ended, I sat at my desk without touching the papers in front of me. Forgiveness tempted me, not because he deserved it, but because grief makes old doors look open. Then Aaron texted again. Screenshots, group chats from months before the wedding. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. Then the dates lined up. Landry had not removed me in a panic on the wedding day. That was only the final click. The plan had been discussed. One message said, "He'll show up in that same tired suit and talk about service." Another said, "No broke soldier energy at the VIP tables." Then Landry's reply, "Exactly, he doesn't fit the image." I read that line 3 times. Whatever softness the phone call had stirred in me disappeared. This was not stress, it was strategy. By late afternoon, the story had shifted again. A colleague forwarded me an industry gossip post written by someone hiding behind initials. It suggested I had exaggerated my role. Another comment claimed I had staged the envelope to embarrass Landry in front of investors. A third hinted that my work was mostly ceremonial. Nothing was bold enough to be sued over. That was the point. Landry had hired someone who knew how to throw smoke without leaving fingerprints. My phone buzzed with a message from an old contact. "You may want to get ahead of this." I sat there looking at the screenshots, the gossip post, and the unopened messages from my family. If I answered publicly, Landry would call me bitter. If I stayed quiet, he would keep feeding people half-truths until enough of them sounded real. That evening, after the office had emptied and the hallway lights dimmed, I opened my desk drawer. The challenge coin sat beside my spare keys. I picked it up and held it under the lamp. My next move would decide far more than a family feud. It would decide whether I kept letting people define my dignity by how loudly they lied. For the next week, I did not chase my brother's lies. That was harder than people think. When someone twists your name in public, every decent instinct tells you to correct it right away. You want to send the message, make the call, post the proof, stand in the middle of the street and say, "That is not what happened." But I had spent enough years around high-stakes rooms to know one thing. Anger moves fast. Truth moves clean. So I moved clean. I met with my attorney in Georgetown. I called two colleagues I trusted, not to ask them to defend me, but to make sure nothing I released touched classified work or private contracts. I asked Maribel Knox, carefully and formally, whether her records showed my removal from the guest list. She sent a short reply. Yes, internal log retained. That was all I needed. Then I reviewed the screenshots Aaron had sent me. The jokes, the planning, the ugly little phrases dressed up as humor. No broke soldier energy at the VIP tables. He doesn't fit the image. I placed my father's challenge coin beside my laptop while I worked. It reminded me not to become the loudest man in the room. The following Friday, a defense sector charity gala brought half of Washington's contractor world into one place. I had planned to attend before any of this happened. So had Landry. He came anyway. That told me something about him. Landry still believed image could outrun character. I arrived in a dark suit, spoke to people I knew, and kept my conversations brief. Across the room, I saw Landry near the bar, smiling too broadly. His tuxedo was perfect. His posture was not. People approached him, but not the way they had at his wedding. A defense CEO asked, "Was your brother really removed from the guest list?" An investor beside him added, "I saw the coordinator's note." Landry laughed as if they were all misunderstanding some private family joke. "Families get complicated," he said. "You know how brothers are." That line bothered me more than an insult would have. You know how brothers are. A soft cover for a hard decision. Then Hollis Crane, one of the investors Landry had been courting, said in a calm voice, "I understand family tension. I do not understand humiliating a veteran and your own father in a hotel lobby." No one shouted, no glass shattered, no dramatic scene unfolded. The disappointment was quieter than that, and much worse. Landry looked around, hoping someone would rescue him with a laugh or a change of subject. Nobody did. By mid-evening, he made his final move. A post began circulating through industry circles. It was written like a concerned insider account. It claimed I had used my brother's wedding to embarrass him. It suggested I had planted the envelope as revenge after a minor family disagreement. It implied my penthouse story was exaggerated, maybe symbolic, maybe not real at all. For a few hours, it worked. I received 3 careful messages from professional contacts. "Is there anything we should know? Do you want to clarify before this grows? Callahan, silence may not help you here." That last one was true, so I stopped being silent, not with a speech, not with accusations, with documents. My attorney released a concise packet to the people who needed it. The venue log showing my removal, the timestamp, the note tied to the groom's request. The screenshots showing the exclusion had been discussed before the wedding. The messages where Landry mocked my service. The records showing I had not made a public statement until after his smear began. Then came the part nobody expected. The penthouse file, purchase records, closing documentation, attorney correspondence, a draft gift transfer prepared before the wedding. The address Landry had dreamed about, the valuation, the intended recipients, Landry Voss and Sable Whitaker. It was all there. Not gossip, not emotion. Paper. The same envelope that had shocked him at the reception opened a second time. Only now the room was larger, and the truth had witnesses. My phone rang 20 minutes later. "Landry." I did not answer. A message followed. "You had no right to do this to me." I looked at those words and almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because even then, he did not ask about Dad. He did not say, "I crossed a line." He did not say, "I am ashamed." He only cared that the mirror had turned around. The next morning, I met Lenora Pike at a law office overlooking a narrow Georgetown street. She ran a veterans housing initiative that helped former service members find stable housing, counseling, and career support. She had tired eyes and a firm handshake. "This is an unusual donation," she said. "It was an unusual week," I replied. We signed the final paperwork before noon. The penthouse did not go to Landry. It did not return to me. Its value would fund transitional housing and long-term support for veterans who had come home to empty rooms, unpaid bills, and families who did not know how to listen. The broke soldier, as my brother had called me, had just turned his dream home into shelter for people who understood service without needing it explained. That evening, I attended the closing portion of the gala. Landry was there for less than half an hour. He stood near the entrance, checking his phone again and again, while people offered him polite nods instead of conversation. When he finally left, no one followed him. No one stopped him. The reputation he had spent years building did not collapse because I attacked it. It collapsed because the foundation had always been hollow. 3 months passed before Landry wrote to me. Not texted, not called from a blocked number, not sent a message through mom. A real letter arrived at my office in a plain white envelope, my name written across the front in his handwriting. I knew it before my assistant said anything. The slant of the letters had not changed much since we were boys, back when he used to write his name on everything he believed belonged to him. I carried it into my office and closed the door. For several minutes I left it on the desk. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Another part of me knew that would still be letting anger make the decision for me. So I sat down, opened it carefully, and read every word. There were no excuses. No, you have to understand. No, I was under pressure. No, people got the wrong idea. Landry admitted he had spent most of his adult life measuring people by rooms, titles, invitations, and the kind of watches they wore at dinner. He wrote that he had mistaken being admired for being respected. He said he had built a life around appearing successful, and somewhere along the way, he stopped asking whether he was becoming a decent man. Then came the line that made me set the letter down. "I did not remove you because I was ashamed of a soldier. I removed you because I was afraid people would see something in you that I did not have." He named it in the next sentence: integrity. I read that part twice, not because it fixed anything, because it was the first honest thing he had given me in a long time. That weekend I drove to see Dad. He was in the kitchen when I arrived, wearing an old cardigan and reading the newspaper like he still trusted print more than screens. The challenge coin sat on the table between his coffee mug and a small dish of peppermints. He saw me looking at it. "I keep it out now," he said. "Helps me remember." We talked for nearly 2 hours, not around things, through them. Dad told me that watching Landry throw that water had broken something in him, but not in the way people might think. The insult hurt, yes. The public shame hurt too. But what troubled him most was realizing that Landry had become bold because the family had let him practice cruelty in smaller ways for years. "I thought I was keeping peace," Dad said. "I was only teaching you to carry pain quietly." I did not rush to comfort him. Sometimes people need to sit with the truth before anybody tries to soften it. After a while, he looked at me and said, "I am sorry, son, for every time I saw it and chose silence." I accepted that apology, not because the past disappeared, it did not, but because honesty had finally entered the house and it deserved a seat at the table. A month later, Lenora Pike invited me to tour the housing program funded by the penthouse donation. I almost declined. I did not want a plaque or a speech, but she told me some of the veterans wanted to meet the person behind the gift, so I went. The building was simple, clean, and alive with small signs of people beginning again. A retired Marine showed me the folder where he kept his trade school schedule. An Army medic told me she was finishing her degree after years of putting everyone else first. A single father walked me through the small apartment where his son had taped a drawing of 2 stick figures on the refrigerator. Then one man, about my age but with older eyes, shook my hand and said, "You gave us a second chance." I have sat across from generals. I have briefed rooms full of executives. I have heard applause in places where every word was measured. None of it hit me like that sentence, because that was the answer I had been chasing without knowing it. Success was not the penthouse. It was not a title. It was not making Landry regret what he lost. Success was what remained after the anger cooled and something useful stood in its place. Before I left, I placed Dad's challenge coin in a small display case near the entrance. Lenora added a card beneath it. Dignity is something no one can give you and no one can take away. I did not sign my name to it. I did not need to. My life kept moving after that. Work grew busier. The calls got bigger. A few doors opened because people finally knew what I did, but that mattered less than I expected. The real change was quieter. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped shrinking to keep others comfortable, and I stopped confusing family with permission to be mistreated. Months later, I saw Landry at a charity event. Not a defense gala, nothing flashy, just a local fundraiser with folding chairs, bad coffee, and volunteers carrying boxes through a side door. He looked older. Maybe he was simply tired of performing. We stood near the back of the room for a moment, neither of us pretending things were normal. He did not mention the wedding. He did not mention the penthouse. He only said, "I'm trying to become someone Dad would respect." I nodded. That was all. It was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness wrapped in a pretty bow. Some bridges can be repaired. Others have to remain closed until the ground beneath them is safe. But it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the first board laid across a long distance. I still have Landry's letter. It stays in a drawer, not as a wound, but as a reminder. People can lose everything they worship and still have a chance to become human again. As for me, I no longer need a ballroom full of wealthy people to confirm my worth. The people who mattered most had always known it, even when some of them learned too late how to say it out loud. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to protect your self-respect? And if they changed later, would you give them another chance? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.